Just pour the coffee, Grandpa. The adults are working. The young SEAL team operator barely glanced at 77-year-old David as he dismissed him with casual arrogance. The secure briefing room at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado held 12 members of a SEAL platoon preparing for a classified mission. David, dressed in a simple polo shirt and khakis, had been quietly serving coffee from the corner, moving between chairs with the unobtrusive efficiency of someone accustomed to being invisible. The young operator, whose name was Marcus, was 26 years old, had deployed twice, and possessed the absolute confidence common to elite warriors who'd proven themselves in combat. To Marcus, David was just another elderly civilian contractor handling the mundane support tasks that kept the base running. If you believe respect should be given before it's earned, comment honor below. David didn't respond to the dismissal. He simply continued pouring coffee, his weathered hands steady despite his age. He'd been serving coffee at briefings for 3 years, a quiet presence that most operators ignored completely. Nobody asked about his background. The badge he wore identified him as civilian support staff, authorized for access to classified briefings but not expected to participate. He arrived early, prepared the briefing rooms, served refreshments during long planning sessions, and cleaned up afterward. The operators treated him as wallpaper, functionally invisible. Some were polite, most were indifferent. Marcus represented the smaller group who were openly dismissive, young men so confident in their own capabilities that they couldn't conceive of learning anything from someone who wasn't in their elite tier. The briefing continued. The platoon commander, a lieutenant commander with 15 years of experience, outlined a complex direct action mission. Intelligence suggested a high-value target in a denied area. The planned insertion required helicopter infiltration, followed by a long overland movement to the objective. Marcus questioned several elements of the plan, his tone challenging. "Sir, this insertion point is too far from the objective. We're adding risk for no tactical benefit. We should insert closer, hit fast, and extract before enemy forces can react." The commander listened patiently. "Marcus, the closer insertion points are in areas with known enemy observation posts. We'd be compromised before we even began the approach." Marcus wasn't convinced. "Sir, with respect, we're SEALs. We can handle closer insertion. The long movement just gives them more time to discover us." Other team members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's tactical aggression was known throughout the community. He'd earned 2 Bronze Stars on his deployments, both for direct action during firefights. He was brave, skilled, and competent. He was also young, and increasingly convinced that his combat experience gave him insight superior to his commanders. The debate continued, with Marcus pushing for a more aggressive approach while the commander advocated for the more cautious plan. The room's energy grew tense. Other operators began choosing sides. The mission planning was degrading into argument. From his corner, David spoke quietly. "The lieutenant commander is correct. The insertion point he's chosen is optimal." Every head turned. The old man serving coffee had spoken. Marcus's face showed irritation and disbelief. "Excuse me, were you asked for your opinion?" David met his gaze calmly. "No. But the tactical plan being debated relates to an area I'm familiar with. The commander's assessment is correct. Closer insertion would be compromised. The enemy observation network in that region is more extensive than the intelligence briefs indicate." Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "And you know this how? Did you learn it serving coffee?" "Sir," he turned to the commander, "are we seriously listening to input from a civilian contractor who pours refreshments?" The commander was watching David with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. "Mr. David, you're familiar with that operational area?" David nodded. "I am. Operated there in 1971 and 1972. The terrain hasn't changed much. Neither has the local population's tendency to observe and report movement. The approach route the lieutenant commander has outlined uses natural terrain features to minimize observation. It's longer, but it's sounder tactically. The aggressive approach the young operator is advocating would work if the enemy observation posts were where the intelligence says they are. But they're not. Never have been. They're 300 meters southwest of the reported positions, which puts them directly in the line of sight for any close insertion. Marcus stood up, his frustration boiling over. You operated there in 1971. You mean you were there over 50 years ago, during Vietnam, probably doing God knows what support work, and you think that's relevant to modern special operations? Sir, he addressed the commander again, this is ridiculous. We don't make tactical decisions based on 50-year-old memories from support personnel who... The commander interrupted firmly. Marcus, sit down, now. The tone carried absolute authority. Marcus sat, confused and angry. The commander looked around the room at his operators. Does anyone here know who David is? Silence. Nobody knew. The old man who poured their coffee was just the old man who poured their coffee. The commander stood and walked to where David stood in the corner. Then, in front of the entire platoon, he came to attention and rendered a crisp, formal salute. David returned it automatically. Decades of training overriding his preference for anonymity. The room erupted in confusion. Commanders don't salute civilian contractors. They don't salute support staff. The only people who receive salutes in that context are military officers or individuals of such significance that protocol demands respect. Marcus stared, trying to process what he was seeing. The commander held the salute for a long moment, then dropped his hand and turned to address his team. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce someone you should have known the moment he walked in the room. The commander's voice was filled with a mixture of respect and reproach. This is David Chambers, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, deployed to Vietnam in 1968 as a member of SEAL Team 1. 3 combat tours. Conducted operations so classified, they're still not fully declassified. After Vietnam, he was recruited into a special access program that officially doesn't exist. Conducted black operations throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. His official record shows killed in action in 1971 during an operation in Laos. That death was never corrected because the mission was so sensitive that everyone involved was officially declared KIA to protect operational security. His call sign during that period was Reaper 9. Some of you have heard the stories. You thought they were legends. You're looking at him. The briefing room went absolutely silent. Reaper 9. The name was whispered in SEAL training, part of the oral tradition passed from instructor to student. A ghost operator who'd conducted missions so dangerous and so classified that his existence was denied. Missions behind enemy lines with no support, no acknowledgement, no possibility of rescue if they went wrong. Operations that shaped the course of the Vietnam War and the Cold War in ways that remained classified decades later. The operators had heard stories of a SEAL team that infiltrated North Vietnam and eliminated targets that changed strategic calculations, of operations conducted with such precision that the enemy never understood what had happened. They'd thought the stories were exaggerated, the kind of legends that grow around special operations. Looking at the elderly man serving coffee, they realized the legends were real. Marcus had gone pale. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by horror at how badly he'd misjudged the situation. Sir, I didn't... How could I have known? David spoke gently, with no anger or reproach. You couldn't have known, son. That's the point. I'm here because I wanted to serve in some capacity after retirement. Serving coffee at briefings lets me stay connected to the community I love. It doesn't matter what job I'm doing. I'm content. The commander shook his head. David, with respect, it does matter. You have knowledge and experience that this team needs. You shouldn't be serving coffee. You should be contributing to mission planning. Your insight into that operational area alone could save lives. David was quiet for a moment. Commander, I've been attending briefings for 3 years. I've heard dozens of mission plans. Most are excellent. Your operators are the best trained, best equipped Special Operations Force in history. They don't need an old man second-guessing their plans. The commander pressed. But when you see a flaw, when you know something that could help, you should speak up. What if I'd approved Marcus's aggressive plan without your input? What if we'd inserted close and been compromised exactly as you described? David shrugged. Then you would have adapted and overcome as SEALs always do. Or you would have learned from the mistake. Sometimes lessons come from experience. Sometimes they come from failure. The platoon's senior chief, a veteran with 20 years of service, spoke up. Master Chief, with respect, we can't afford to learn some lessons through failure. Not in our business. Failure means dead operators and compromised missions. If you have knowledge that can help us avoid that, we need to hear it. Pride be damned. David looked around the room at the young faces, all now watching him with a mixture of awe, respect, and desperate curiosity. These were good men, brave and skilled. They deserved every advantage. He'd been holding back, not wanting to intrude, not wanting to be the old veteran living in the past. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe his knowledge still had value. Maybe invisibility wasn't service. It was abdication. All right, David said finally. Let me tell you about that operational area. Not just what I remember from 1971, but what I know from ongoing study. I may not be operating anymore, but I stay current. That region where you're planning to insert. The enemy has evolved their observation network over the decades, but the fundamentals remain consistent. They use terrain and local population in specific ways. If you understand those patterns, you can move through their territory nearly invisible. If you don't, you'll be compromised within hours of insertion. For the next 2 hours, David shared knowledge that no briefing book contained. Tactical insights developed through actual operations. Cultural understanding earned through years of working in that specific area. Terrain analysis based on first-hand experience. The operators took notes frantically. Marcus approached David after the briefing ended. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by genuine humility. Master Chief, I owe you an apology. What I said was disrespectful and ignorant. I'm sorry. David studied the young SEAL, seeing both the talent and the dangerous overconfidence that could get people killed. Marcus, you're a good operator. Your record proves that, but you need to learn humility. Not because it's a virtue, though it is, but because arrogance creates blind spots, and blind spots get people killed. You assumed you knew everything relevant to the mission. You dismissed input from someone who might have valuable knowledge. That assumption almost led the team into a bad tactical decision. Learn from that. Marcus nodded, accepting the correction. Master Chief, would you be willing to mentor me? I clearly have things to learn about tactical planning beyond just fighting. David smiled. Son, I think you've got plenty of people who can mentor you. Your commander is excellent. Your senior chief has forgotten more about special operations than most people ever learn. Listen to them. But yes, I'm willing to share what I know when it's relevant. The commander rejoined them. David, I'm making this official. I'm requesting that you be reassigned from support staff to senior tactical advisor. You'll participate in mission planning for all platoon operations. We need your expertise integrated into our process. David tried to object, but the commander was insistent. This isn't charity. This isn't a feel-good assignment for a veteran. This is operational necessity. You have knowledge that can save lives and enhance mission success. Using that knowledge isn't an honor we're granting you. It's an obligation we have to our operators. David finally agreed, though he insisted on continuing to serve coffee at briefings. Keeps me humble, he explained. And besides, I make good coffee. The platoon adopted a new tradition. At the beginning of every briefing, the commander would call the room to attention and render honors to David. Not to embarrass him, but to remind everyone in the room that expertise doesn't always come in expected forms, that respect must be given before someone's full value can be recognized, and that assumptions can blind you to the resources right in front of you. Marcus became one of David's most dedicated students. He learned to balance his natural aggression with tactical patience. He learned to seek input from unexpected sources. He learned that being the most skilled operator in the room doesn't mean being the smartest person in the room. Years later, after Marcus had made senior chief himself and was training a new generation of SEALs, he shared David's story with his students. "The most valuable lesson I ever learned," he told them, "came from an old man I dismissed as irrelevant. I almost missed learning from one of the greatest operators in SEAL history, because I judged him by his age and his job instead of by his knowledge and experience." Don't make that mistake. Listen to everyone. Learn from everyone. Respect everyone until they prove they don't deserve it. And even then, treat them professionally. You never know who's standing in front of you. David continued as a senior tactical advisor until age finally forced him into full retirement at 84. By then, he'd contributed to over 200 successful missions. His tactical insights had helped prevent numerous casualties and mission failures. The operators who worked with him understood that they were receiving knowledge from someone who represented a direct link to the foundational years of naval special warfare, who'd operated in conditions and against enemies that tested skills in ways modern operators rarely experienced. When David finally retired, the Naval Special Warfare Command held a ceremony attended by hundreds of current and former SEALs. The commander of Naval Special Warfare Command presented him with a plaque that read, "Reaper 9, Master Chief David Chambers, forever a SEAL." The young operator, who dismissed David as just the coffee guy, went on to have a distinguished career. He never forgot the humiliation of disrespecting someone who turned out to be legendary. But more importantly, he never forgot the grace with which David had handled the situation, the patience he'd shown in teaching rather than belittling, the humility he'd maintained despite his incredible background. That lesson, that true professionals don't need to announce their expertise, that quiet competence speaks louder than arrogance, shaped how Marcus led and taught throughout his career. He became known as a patient instructor, someone who listened before judging, who sought input from unexpected sources, who treated everyone with respect regardless of rank or position. David's story spread throughout the special operations community and beyond. It became a teaching example about the danger of assumptions, the importance of respect, and the value of institutional knowledge. Instructors at BUDIS training used it to teach humility to students who thought they knew everything. Leadership courses used it to illustrate how unconscious bias can blind us to valuable resources. Veterans organizations used it to remind people that service doesn't end when someone takes off the uniform, and capability doesn't diminish just because someone ages. The core lesson resonated across all contexts. Never dismiss people based on appearance or current circumstances, because you never know who you're really talking to. If you believe that respect should be automatic rather than earned, that age brings wisdom rather than irrelevance, and that true expertise doesn't advertise itself, subscribe to this channel. We share stories that honor those who served quietly, who were dismissed and then vindicated, who taught us that capability and character are often hidden in unexpected places. Share David's story with someone who needs to be reminded about humility. Comment about times when you discovered that someone you'd underestimated possessed extraordinary knowledge or experience. These stories preserve the understanding that the person serving coffee might be the most capable person in the room, that legends walk among us unrecognized, and that our failure to see value doesn't mean value doesn't exist.